Danny Flexen here for Seconds Out with Stephen Espinoza, head of Showtime in the US, huge broadcast network, big commitment to boxing. Before we talk about Deontay Wilder against Tyson Fury, which is obviously the reason we're all here, just want to ask you how you feel, and I know I won't be the first to ask you this today, about HBO giving up their commitment to boxing. Does that make your job easier, or does it just mean the threats come from a different area?
The latter. There's always going to be competition, and so it really doesn't change much. As a boxing fan, it's a little bit sad to see one of the networks that was important in the sport getting out of it, but there certainly is no shortage of other networks and other platforms that are getting in. So it really doesn't change much. The one thing that I would sort of maybe take a little bit of issue with, there's a suggestion in some of HBO's comments that maybe the audience isn't as receptive or interested in boxing anymore. Now, I certainly don't know HBO's audience. I know our audience. And our audience is very receptive. It's an important part of our programming. I think that's reflected in what you see on the air and the commitment we've made in the kinds of fights, the kinds of resources that we're putting into the sport. So if anything, we are expanding our presence in the sport. It's an important part of our business, and it provides a good return on investment for us.
Well, good kind of linked question to that. A lot of people are calling HBO boxing's departure that they're victims of the digital revolution, streaming services like DAZN, ESPN Plus, which links to ESPN. How have Showtime managed to avoid those pitfalls, whereas HBO have fallen victim to them?
Well, I think it's a need to adjust. So the reality is, for us, the switch to streaming is certainly not anything new. It's a product we launched 2 years ago in terms of being able to stream and be able to get the Showtime subscription without going through a cable company. So, in that way, the experience of watching Showtime boxing is no different than DAZN, ESPN, or any other streaming service. And it's important to be in every platform that you can. So, whether that was a factor with HBO or loss of the boxing talent, whatever it was, there are no shortage of other people ready to step into their place.
Your recent, or Showtime's recent deal with PBC and Al Heyman, does that justify the PBC model? A lot of people criticised it, but now they've got a renewed deal, both with you guys and with Fox. Does that show that maybe Al Heyman was right all along?
Well, it certainly, I think, shows that some of the critics of PBC were wrong, the ones who were saying that they would go out of business or are going out of business. Having said all of that, I don't think you see ESPN in the business as aggressively as they are. I don't think you see Fox in the business as we are if PBC doesn't do what they've done. And this is before these big deals. And what I say is, regardless of what the future of the PBC business, they demonstrated that boxing can work on network TV. And I think they've gotten people interested in it. As an aside, they also got their own deals extended, so it's good that they benefited from it as well. But I think the reason you see, ESPN and others getting in is because they've seen the rising tide that has gone on the last few years, and now they're interested in getting a piece of the action.
Let's finally talk about this fight. I'm sure you'll be relieved to know. Deontay Wilder against Tyson Fury. Deontay Wilder's been one of the highest rated boxers on Showtime for a long time now. How rewarding is it for you to finally be able to put him on a pay-per-view platform?
Well, it's really about getting him the big fights, and I think, for us as a network and for him career-wise, finding the big fight for him has been a little bit elusive, certainly in actually getting the fight, because he's had those fights scheduled. He had the Povetkin fight scheduled. He's had other fights scheduled that, he's been the victim of bad luck or injury or positive drug tests or whatever it was. So I think, if anything, I'm happy for him personally to see him get a fight of this magnitude. I'm certainly happy for the network, for boxing fans, because this is arguably the most significant heavyweight fight in the U.S. since Lewis Tyson, or maybe Lewis versus Klitschko, which has been almost 2 decades.
From your perspective and a broadcast perspective generally, was this a much easier fight to put together than a fight between Wilder and Joshua? Because Joshua's obviously on DAZN at the moment, he's more or less a free agent, whereas Wilder Fury was always going to be on Showtime, you would think.
I think so. I mean, ultimately, I don't think Joshua Wilder negotiations stalled on the issue of networks, but Maybe the DAZN element played a little bit because, certainly I think it was important for DAZN and Eddie to have something that made a big splash, and certainly having Joshua is the highest profile programming they have. It was a frustrating experience. I mean, for that negotiation, we're not on the front lines, but we're certainly a very interested observer, and in some ways we do participate at times. But this particular fight was relatively easy to make, and I think what it demonstrates is when two fighters really want to fight, then the fight is very likely to happen. Deontay's his own guy. He's his own boss. Tyson Fury is certainly his own man. And I think regardless of who they're working with and who they're advised by, if they say, this is the fight that I want, that's the fight that is going to get made. So I think, in that respect, there's, a lot of other factors in the business discussions. But, when Deontay says, give me the Joshua fight, and Joshua says, give me the Wilder fight, I think it will happen. It's just a matter of timing.
We talked about Deontay's ratings that he's had on regular Showtime. What makes him such a big attraction in your view?
Well, he's one of the more charismatic and likable characters in boxing. And in fact, that's what was so attractive about Wilder versus Fury, is they both are. They're both very charismatic. They're both witty. They're two of the best talkers in the sport. For Deontay, fans love heavyweight knockouts, and there's no one in the sport who does it as frequently or as impressively as Deontay. He finally got sort of his career-defining fight in Luis Ortiz, and it was, something out of a Rocky movie, virtually. So I think all the pieces are coming together for Deontay at just the right time.
And just the last one for you. We spoke to Deontay earlier and asked him for a prediction over how many buys this would sell. Now, you're probably not going to like this, but he said 2.5 million. I was hoping you would give us maybe a more realistic perspective on that.
I think that's a great target. I think
ambition
that's
should never be
right.
frowned upon, right?
And that's exactly what it is. It is ambitious. It's a busy sports market, and they're both first-time pay-per-views. Look, I would, if you look at the pay-per-view debuts of everyone from De La Hoya to Pacquiao to even Mayweather, they've all been, in the low to mid 600 six figures. So, 200, 300, 400,000. Now, here I think we have a slightly higher upside because it's a big heavyweight fight and you have two really compelling characters. I'd be thrilled if we surpassed those numbers, but I'd be thrilled to get to 2.5 million. I think if we're getting there, then I'm getting.
Is there a minimum that you'd be happy with?
No, at this point, I think if we're in the low to mid six figures, I think we've been very successful. And anything beyond that would be, stupendous.
Brilliant. Well, Stephen Espinoza, we thank you for your time.
All right, thank you.